beauty through travel. I feel blessed that in my later years in life, I've had the opportunity to do some international travel for both work and as a tourist, and have found beauty in those experiences. In 2006, my husband and I traveled to Japan, staying with my sister-in-law, who worked for the military. We were able to see key places, learn about the culture, and experienced how very crowded a country Japan is. How beautifully they seem to move about like a fishbowl in their marketplaces, everyone on one side moving instinctively forward, while their other side naturally moves the other way. I had to retrieve a brand new coat I had left from a restaurant, and as I was leaving, I mentioned to an American family leaving with me, "I'm so glad they saved my coat." The woman said, "Had you left it there for months, they would have saved it. I once left my laptop on the subway, and it was saved for me." We're leaving Japan after 4 years, and I'm worried for my 9 and 10-year-old sons because they have no street smarts. To further reinforce the trust they spoke about, my husband and I grabbed a kids' meal at McDonald's, always saving the toys for our grandchildren. The cashier pointed to a long table out in the lobby where all the toys were placed, there for the taking. "Help yourselves," was the message. My husband and I looked at each other, making the motion that would look what that would look like in the States. The trust in this country was beautiful. It was work-related when we traveled to Australia. A team of colleagues and I were there to do a 3-day conference entitled Citizen-Centered Leadership Development for participants who support individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. One of the concepts were difficult to grasp for some, and I was pulled aside during the break. I listened, and after a brief discussion, they added, "By the way, what makes this so much more difficult to understand is your accent is so thick." That was fun. But to get to the beauty in Australia, after the conference, my husband and I would take the tram into Melbourne to see the sights every day. At each stop, I took notice that when an older person would enter, immediately the youth would stand up and offer their seat. Over and over again, I witnessed that kind consideration of offering the comfort of their seat to someone older. It was automatic, built into their culture, and I wondered how that was taught. Now, I don't use public transportation, so I can't compare, though I wonder if that's what I would see in our community. One more work-related travel was in Canada, and the extended stay took me to the most beautiful Niagara Falls. The best experience was the Maiden of the Mist boat ride that could be renamed Maiden of the Drenched. I was so overcome, I screamed with delight as if I was on a roller coaster. My colleagues asked, "Was that you screaming?" I left wanting to return, especially because my husband was not with me on that trip. This return trip was completely planned, completely paid for, right down to the last detail, for July of 2020. Need I say more? Because I want to end this with the beauty of our travels, I'll close with our most recent travel. This was to the not-so-beautiful desert of Las Vegas. Where was the beauty? That would be in the faces of our beautiful grandchildren, who had it seemed like forever since we were able to see and embrace or even get to know. We spent 2 days playing on the floor, celebrating Papa's birthday, and sharing our New Orleans and Hispanic dishes together. It was all very beautiful. Thank you.
So I'm aware that Reeve and I both will be speaking, or Reeve has already spoken, I will be speaking about beauty discovered while traveling. And I want to acknowledge that both of our reflections come from a place of privilege, because we have the privilege and the means to be able to travel internationally. And I know that that's not the case for all members of this congregation. So I just want to acknowledge that economic distinction, that class privilege. Also aware that many in our congregation have traveled internationally as part of the military, and acknowledge that portal to the world. Others of us are armchair travelers with books and magazines, and now, because of video so easily accessible and the scripture known as YouTube, we can travel the world from the safety and the comfort of our homes, assuming we are privileged enough to have that access to the internet. This morning I'm revisiting a sermon about travel in Uzbekistan. I first shared this sermon in 2018, but we revisit it because these words seem newly relevant to us today, given the world's current state of affairs. It touches on timelessness and the wages of war. It touches on brokenness in the world and about nurturing beauty in the world and in ourselves. In 2017, when I told people I was planning to travel to Uzbekistan, the most common reaction I received was, "Uz what?" Followed by, "Uz where?" That's where, that red highlighted country in Central Asia. Uzbekistan, just below the massive hulk that is Russia and to the west of China. Uzbekistan, with Kazakhstan Uzbekistan, it's below Kazakhstan and above Tajikistan, Afghanistan, and Turkmenistan. Uzbekistan was the center of the fabled Silk Road, that trade route that stretched from China to the Mediterranean Sea. And being the center of the Silk Road, it was arguably the most traversed place in the ancient world. How to describe the ancient, timeless, and modernizing experience that is Uzbekistan? Uzbekistan is a swirl of color, the blues, whites, greens, and golds of monumental mosques and madrasas. Uzbekistan is the warmth, wisdom of ancient fires, temples that were the birthplaces of the Zoroastrian religion. Uzbekistan is the bright illumination of ancient centers of learning, academies, out of which grew some of the earliest discoveries of astronomy, mathematics, and medicine. Uzbekistan is the ancient splendor of the Silk Road trade routes, with camel caravans carrying spices, teas, fabrics, salt, sugar, precious metals, jewels, and porcelain treasures, camel caravans that allowed East to meet West, spreading ideas, cultures, foods, and religions. Truly the first World Wide Web. The first taste of globalization. Uzbekistan is vast cotton fields and fruits orchards in the Fergana Valley, often harvested by forced labor. And Uzbekistan is world-class snowboarding and skiing in the Chimgan Mountains. Uzbekistan is the iron fist of 67 years of Soviet occupation. 1924 to 1991, when the country became a satellite of the Russian motherland. Uzbekistan is the harsh reality of the now independent Uzbek Republic, which boasts one of the most oppressive and authoritarian governments in the world. Uzbekistan is the earthy smell of a tea house tucked into a crumbling alleyway, displaying a sign proclaiming not Starbucks, but Silk Road Cafe, family-owned and operated since 1400. Uzbekistan is the sturdy softness of a wind-swept yurt. That's me meeting my first yurt. Uzbekistan is the hard gray of Soviet-era cement construction and the soft gray of a donkey hauling eggplants and tomatoes to the bazaar. Uzbekistan is the tall, tiled minarets that once beckoned desert travelers into the safety of the Silk Road cities of Samarkand, Khiva, and Bukhara. And Uzbekistan is the honking of cars and buses in the smog-filled traffic circle in the center of the capital city of Tashkent. Uzbekistan, if nothing else, is a feast for the senses, an ever-changing complexity that delights, overwhelms, and sometimes scares. But for me, the true heart of Uzbekistan is none of those things that I've just said, the things that you've just seen. For me, the heart of the country is something simple, something silent, something solitary that spoke to my soul. This is a stone from the ancient fortress city of Toprakala in the Kazikum Desert of Uzbekistan. Almost 3,000 years ago, Toprakala was part of the kingdom of Khorezm, the oldest civilization in Central Asia. The kingdom of Khorezm was a great cultural center with influence and splendor and longevity, perhaps unparalleled in the ancient world. The kingdom of Khorezm and its vast network of fortress cities sourced its strength and inspiration in part from its Zoroastrian religion, a faith that offered a balanced understanding of good and evil, light and shadow, life and death, and rebirth. So powerful was Khorezm that even Alexander the Great avoided confronting it during his quest to conquer the world. Alexander led his armies around Khorezm rather than trying to march through and subdue it. He knew better. He knew he'd be defeated. Khorezm flourished from the 6th century BCE until some 2,000 years later, when Genghis Khan and his Mongol hordes invaded. With complete disregard for the people and rich culture of the region, Genghis Khan brutally butchered its inhabitants. Blood flowed in the streets, and the severed heads of a once great people were stacked, the legend says, on top of one another in grisly pyramids rising several hundred feet in the air. A sad testament to humanity's timeless impulse to conquer and destroy. But today, some 800 years after that unfathomable devastation, the majestic fortress cities of Khorezm still stand to inspire new generations. The landscape, as you can see, is different now. What were once fertile fields and rich irrigation-fed farmland is now a vast, remote, and empty desert that burns under an unforgiving summer sun. Yet, these walls remain. The walls of that fortress remains. The stones in those walls of those fortresses remain 3,000 years after human hands carefully put them in place. And there I stood with those walls and stones, a strange, pale visitor from a far-off land and a more complex time, come to bear witness to their history and their silence, their starkness, and their story. Have you ever stood in a place of stone and story? Have you ever stood in a place of stone and story? Perhaps that place had jagged stones that were scattered naturally on a windswept mountaintop or a crevice or ravine. Perhaps that place had smooth stones that water had washed along a lazy riverbed, or in the thundering of a waterfall in the spring Sierras, or as Riva mentioned, in the Niagara Gorge, a beauty and splendor that caused you to exclaim in joy and wonder. Perhaps that place of stone and story had shiny decorative stones arranged ever so carefully in a quiet grove or garden, such as Fresno's own Shinzen Japanese garden at Woodward Park, or perhaps in a friend's backyard. Or perhaps, like in the many sacred ruins in the Americas and around the world, perhaps like Hozem, that place had stones that had been shaped into walls, into houses and ancient cities. Have you ever stood in a stone-filled place? A place that, without any effort on your part, centered you solidly in the present moment, yet connected you to the wisdom of the past. Of such places, poet David White writes, "You have never looked into the immovability of stone like this. The way it holds you, gives you not a way forward, but a doorway in. Staunches your need to live, becomes faithful by going nowhere. Something that wants you to stay here and look back, to be weathered by what comes to you, like the way you too have traveled so far away to be here, once reluctant and now as solid and as here and as willing to be touched as everything you have found." The stones have stories to tell if we but listen. The stones hold truths for tomorrow if we would but hear. Monk and philosopher Thomas Merton writes, "Be still. Listen to the stones of the wall. Be silent. They try to speak your name. Listen to the living walls. Who are you? Who are you? Whose silence are you? Who, be quiet, are you as these stones are quiet? Do not think of what you are, still less of what you one day may be. Rather, Be what you are. But who? Be the unthinkable one you do not yet know. Oh, be still while you are still alive, and all things live around you. And all things live around you, speaking to your own being, speaking by the unknown that is in you and in themselves. This is a stone from the ancient fortress city of Toprakala. Almost 3,000 years ago, this stone was part of the kingdom of Khwarezm, the oldest civilization in Central Asia. This stone was part of a cultural center that sourced its strength from the Zoroastrian religion, a faith tradition that taught a balanced understanding of good and evil, light and shadows, life, death, rebirth. This stone and Khwarezm flourished for 2,000 glorious years until a callous and barbarous leader emerged and arrived, and with complete disregard for the people and the rich culture of the region, brutally butchered its inhabitants. He did so without decorum. He did so without respect. He did so with no sense of loss for all he dismantled, dismembered, and destroyed. But today, some 800 years after that unfathomable destruction and devastation, the majestic fortress cities of Khwarezm still stand to inspire new generations. They stand there, long and lasting. The stones endure. May this stone from a people who lived 3,000 years ago remind us that something lasts beyond this present moment. May this stone from a culture that flourished 3,000 years ago remind us that there are truths that endure beyond times of uncertainty, upheaval, fear, falsehood, and destruction. May this stone from an ancient culture and religion remind us as Unitarian Universalists that our culture and our religion does matter. Our holy work of loving inclusively, growing spiritually, serving gratefully, and working for justice does matter. But may this stone also remind us that we are just a part of something larger, vaster, and more sweeping than this moment in time. Others who come after us will carry forward our work to new generations. May this ancient stone be a building block in the future, a building block in the future that we shape but will never see, a future that we hope awakens humanity to the beauty that is within them, among them, and beyond them. Our stones will one day have stories to tell to those who come after us. Our stones will one day hold truths for someone else's tomorrow. Que así sea, bendito sea. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen.